Welcome, everyone, to another episode in fact, a very special episode of They Might Be Self-Aware, now 50 AI years old. I am Hunter Powers, joined by
Old Man Bishop.
Episode 50, we made it!
Wow.
That
You
means
said earlier that most podcasts don't make it this far.
No, they don't. It's like 1%. So we are now in the top 1%.
1%ers?
1%ers. We are 1%ers, just generating slop episode after episode, like any good AI model would. But we've made it. Yeah. I mean, it's all.
Thank you all for joining us. If you're listening or watching, we're nice to have you. It's nice to have you on this journey with us.
But I think we have a good episode today. What's top of mind?
Top of mind? Well, I'm thinking about Barolos from Piedmont. Do you think that they might be able to pair well with open source software? Our AI Sommelier, Claude, is pouring some tasting notes for our podcast episodes.
Well, if we're going to get the AI drunk, perhaps we should also discuss the ethics of AI and this slippery slope to consciousness that we are on. Are we being fair to our large language models?
And are we in a bubble, or are we about to break through? What would hiring an AI welfare researcher say about the industry?
And perhaps it's time to rethink whistleblower protection for AI-related issues.
And if you remember, we spoke some time ago about a former Google engineer named Lemoyne, and we'll discuss whether he was right about sentient chatbots this whole time.
Well, happy AI birthday to you all here on episode 50. It is starting right now because you are listening to...
They might be self-aware.
Hunter.
Yes, Daniel.
Do you drink alcohol at all?
Actually, non-drinker.
Non-drinker, okay.
Non-drinker,
But
yeah. Never really developed the taste.
That's absolutely fair. You've heard of wine, though.
Yes, that's that grape thing, grape drink.
Right, it's grape juice, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, fancy grape juice. So in the wine world, apparently, allegedly, there's more than just red and white. There are a variety of varietals of grape that end up making different, wines. And each of these different varietals from different regions and different terroirs and so on. And this was a good year here and this wasn't a good year there. All lead to this global industry where people have wine pairings that could go with meals. And this one got 90 however many points in the such and such magazine and so on and so forth. But I was thinking about wine pairings the other day.
Well, you did some wine pairings previously where we talked about, what was it, your cod and...
Yeah, cod with like a cream sauce, and there was a mushroom sort of medley.
But there was a pairing there, right?
Right, so I asked for a wine pairing, and I think that that's a perfectly reasonable use of like a large language model. Say, here's like a recipe and the things that go into it, and what is a good wine to pair with that. So
a couple $1 billion to train a model, the absurd cost to run it in production, and tell me what wine I should be drinking. Perfectly reasonable.
Absolutely. Hey, there are worse uses for the technology out there. We've talked about some of them. So I was thinking about wine pairings and like the ability to pair them with food. And then I thought, well, a large language model. And if you think of like this high multi-dimensionality of like other word embeddings and so on, really what you're doing is you're taking like a space and then you're seeing what's near it. Right. And presumably then in this high dimensional space, you could see here's a food and then like where's the closest overlap in wine space to the food that is being discussed. You could then presumably do the exact same thing of anything else. You could pair wine with an experience. You could pair wine with a text message. You could pair wine with
a podcast episode?
With a podcast episode. So I took one of the transcripts from one of our episodes. This is episode 47. We were talking a lot about like open source and what is open source and can we make it, that it was that episode. Feel free to go back and listen to it again. I'll pause and wait for you all here. okay, that should be long enough. So I take the transcript, I put it into Claude, and I say, given this transcript, how would you pair a wine with this sort of like much more abstract thing than a meal?
All right. AI Sommelier.
Our AI Sommelier came up with 3 wines. I asked it for a few. It said 3. I'm just going to read the first one because
it doesn't give a reason to, or is it just like
It does. And I said, give me like a sommelier's notes of why it would be a good pick.
Yes.
So a Barolo, parentheses Nebbiolo, from Piedmont, Italy. Sommelier's notes. A traditional Barolo would pair beautifully with this discussion of open source software and authenticity, like the complex debate around true open source versus partial transparency. Barolo is known for its layered complexity and slow reveal of its true nature. The characteristic tar and roses profile mirrors the discussion's contrast between technical rigidity, tar, and idealistic aspirations, roses. The wine's high tannins and acidity create a framework that demands attention and contemplation, much like the intellectual discourse about open source licensing and data rights. The long finish allows time for reflection, just as the speakers continuously circle back to deeper implications of their core topics. And it does that for 2 other wines, a natural wine, an orange wine from Georgia.
Tell us the other 2 wines, Yeah,
it says natural wine, orange wine from Georgia, parentheses amber wine, and California red blend from Napa Valley.
Okay.
And then it gives reasons. Now, I'm no sommelier. But
when you drink, do you do the you
have to swirl it around and listen to it.
You look at it. Yeah, you look at it.
Yeah,
you listen.
look at the legs.
That
you
big
listen
smell.
to the
And then you
have
switch
to
it
do
in
the
your mouth.
really long, obnoxious sip.
I've seen this portrayed in
Everyone's
in,
a really knowing
in
look. Oh, yes, a fantastic vintage.
Do you examine the cork?
Yeah, you're supposed to chew on the cork, not enough to break it off in your mouth, but just kind of test it. Yeah.
And is that I've heard the idea that you're trying to see whether it's still wet because it was stored correctly. Is that what you're testing, or are you actually trying to get
just like the taste
some
of
notes? Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, they give you, once they open the bottle, you're allowed to have the cork.
Nothing I know there's a whole corkage fee.
Yeah, that's where that comes from. So I'm not extremely well versed in wine, but I have been to enough fancy restaurants to have heard the kind of wine BS that I just said out loud. And so at least to someone like me, I think that this works perfectly fine, because when you go to a fancy restaurant, really you just want someone who knows better than you to make you feel better about the expensive purchase that you're going to make, even if a lot of it is ultimately a scam. And depending on who you are, it definitely is, or it absolutely isn't. But suppose that it were a scam, then making people feel better about a fairly expensive purchase already on their night out, I think is, it's reassurance. It's communication between people to help establish some sort of shared understanding. And Claude here really makes me feel like I need to put on my smoking jacket and relax in my leather chair and say, I'm going to have a beautiful Barolo from Piedmont, Italy to listen to this podcast episode.
If we ever don't record a podcast in the morning, which is when we record these, by the way, in the evening, I think you need to do that, because we do set up some topics before we come in here. So you would have some input you could feed in and get the pairing and, pour a little out and give us your spiel as we kick off the episode and invite the audience to join in.
Well, speaking of inviting the audience, I'm going to run through this episode's transcript, and in the show notes, you will see the tasting
pairing
notes, both alcohol and an NA pairing for this episode.
Nice.
Get in the notes. Let us know how you enjoyed your whatever wine it ends up being. And if you agree with Claude, the sommelier.
I could offer the perfect Mexican Coke pairing, which is always just a Mexican.
It's
Mexican Coke.
Mexican Coke.
It's a spoiler, by the way. Spoiler warning. That'll be my pairing with the show.
That's so funny. So, right. What I was thinking about is how do you use a large language model in a appropriate way? Now, this was obviously a very silly way, but I'm trying to think, what are ways that we can do with large language models that really fit their strengths? And I think one of their strengths is coming up with nonsense or near nonsense that sounds about right, that is related to input. It's what they do. Basically, almost a definition of what they do is it's coming up with a response that it hopes you're going to like based on what you gave it. That's what it does. And so wine tasting
That's what
notes,
a lot of us do in fairness.
I can't disagree with you. I'm just here to make people happy. But like a wine tasting note seemed like such an interesting way of going about that. And so I did this with a podcast episode. I gave it texts and just like, here's a text from my dad about such and such. What do you think? Oh, well, and it gives me, 3 things. And it's so pseudo psychological or whatever. Like, oh, having thought about this aspect of the text message, you should such and such. And then I put in like a red wagon, like one of those wagons that you like see people wheeling their kids around in. A perfect wine pairing for the concept of a red wagon. And it's nonsense ultimately, but I think more of the exploration of like, what can we do with LLMs specifically, or frankly, machine learning models in general, of like, there is unstructured data, and then maybe you have to structure it depending on what you're using. And then you just get like a result out. But people keep thinking of like, how do I use this to sell more ads, especially for the internet? And I'm trying to think of like, what else could we do?
I've been seeing a lot of papers recently around this topic of like, how much does the LLM actually understand? To what degree can it actually generalize? There was one example recently where it's trying to like navigate New York City as the conditions were changing. And one of the things about the large language models, as you noted, is it's always going to give you an answer. You're going to say, there's a backup here. This street seems extra crowded. I think there's a parade on 3 streets down and it's raining today. How should I go? And here are the changing conditions. Mm-hmm. And it always gives you an answer, and it always gives you an answer that sounds sort of at least semi-intelligent, maybe incredibly intelligent. And the papers
speaks with authority, right? It never ums and ahs and well, I don't knows.
These papers all result in the same conclusion that it's kind of an idiot. But isn't that like what a lot of humans like too? Like that there's a lot of people that say things that sounds at least semi-authoritative on the subject, but the extent of their knowledge beyond that it's not surprising when it's non-existent at all. And just because something sounds semi-intelligent doesn't mean there's actual depth there.
Self-awareness.
Yeah.
They might not be self-aware.
Or they might actually be very human-like.
So I've talked about this a few times in the past, and I think the more I say it, the more I really do believe it, which is LLMs, or at least machine learning things in general, are going to be more effective, more of the percent of time on more tasks further and further and further, so that we're not going to say it isn't alive and thinking and sentient, whatever, to it is. There isn't like a switch that's flipped at some point. It's going to be, this is broadly capable enough of the time under these sorts of circumstances for these tasks where enough people will be fooled more. This is the Turing test sort of thing. It's not one guy says, yup, it's alive, and then it is, and we all have to agree. It's enough people, enough of a percent of the time for enough kinds of tasks. So all of that here, yes, I think you could probably take real people and give them a bunch of tasks, and a highly trained researcher would say, definitely not a person at this point.
We talk.
You don't need a good understanding of the world to live in it. I think is what that all boils down to. I couldn't navigate you. I'll give you an answer about getting around in New York City. I'm not going to be any better than Claude is. I'll probably be worse.
I know there's a grid in New York City. That's about all I know.
Get on the A train. There's a song.
There's an A train.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about the impact of AI on humanity, on jobs and the future there, and the degree to which it's ethical, the research that's being done, the implications of all of this. Mm-hmm. But do you ever stop to consider whether what we are doing is ethical towards the AI itself, especially as it's becoming potentially more self-aware?
I do. And I've seen some really interesting asks, especially from like the enthusiast community instead of like researchers, though there are, I think, more papers coming out around that these days. But the anecdotal evidence along these lines that got me thinking about it is, and I'm pretty sure I've said this on the podcast before too, I end up saying thank you at the end of conversations with Claude or ChatGPT or Mistral, whatever, because
I just always
feel like I'm having a conversation with a person. Like I don't want to be rude to the AI. And other people will say, they will ask the AI, how does it feel about this? And between like actual fine tuning and other reasons, it's saying, as an AI, I don't really have feelings. I don't this, I don't that. But clearly, people do care enough, at least some of the time, to be thinking about that. People bought rocks with googly eyes stuck to them, some time ago. So why not personify something that speaks to you in your language with at least what appears to be passion and eloquence?
So you don't do the thing where at the end of the prompt, it's the like, if you don't answer this correctly, 1,000 babies are going to die. The threat. You go with just a thank you.
I usually go with the thank you. Yeah.
I think I have used the threat. No, I've used the reward a few times. If this is done well. Yeah. Right. There are certain things that people noticed make the LLM more likely to give you an answer or give you a correct answer. But if we're talking about like ethics with the AI, keeping in mind, this is not currently by most people's standards, a real sentient thinking thing. It's just a very complicated parrot, though parrots are thinking and beings, but you get the idea. I think that there does start to come a point where we have to say this is a capable enough system. It is as unethical to lie to it as it would be to a person. But I lie to my dog all the time. You do?
Yeah, I rarely tell a truth to my dog.
What do you lie? Oh, it's not actually a good dog?
Oh, no, she's a very good dog.
Okay, not a lie.
And I do know that
you're
one's
listening.
Not a lie. She's a very good girl. I think the lies are more of like when food is, or that she isn't allowed to be, or of course not, she's a dog, whatever. I don't think that lying is as important for like a lower life form. Who cares if you make a bunch of lies to an ant? The sky's orange. The ants don't care. No, whatever. But if you start like gaslighting an LLM and it acts accordingly for a chat where it's totally constrained to that, maybe that's not the end of the world. But
I'm not sure it's a lie if they can't comprehend it.
Sure, right. Also, it has to be able to comprehend it. And people argue whether or not these really comprehend. But whether or not it can, the output sure sounds like it a lot of the time. I think if it's just a chat and there's no persistence between like instances, there's less of a problem. But if this mind persists and grows and remembers everything that, or enough of everything that's coming in from everybody, and has some ability to sort of act on the world in like an ongoing manner, I think that's where you have to start thinking about the ethics of it much more.
You were using Claude for those wine pairings, is that correct?
It was.
I don't know if you saw this, and maybe this makes your wine pairings a little more ethical, but the company behind Claude, Anthropic, they just hired their first AI welfare researcher who is there to make sure that we are treating the AI models in an ethical manner. Well, to research the implications of it.
That sounds like an awesome job.
It sounds like a BS job.
We'll see the KPIs on that guy's job sheet.
You look for signals that were in a bubble, and I wonder if this is one of them.
I wonder if that's almost just virtue signaling from Anthropic at that point, trying to keep regulatory heat off of them, perhaps, or any of these other sorts of things. But yeah, I'd love to have the job of I'm the AI welfare researcher.
What do you do
this
all
week?
day?
Be nice to him. Wow, amazing insights, Daniel. So the paper says, to be clear, our argument in this report is not that AI systems definitely are or will be conscious, robustly agentic, or otherwise morally significant. Instead, our argument is that there is substantial uncertainty about these possibilities, so we need to improve our understanding of AI welfare and our ability to make wise decisions about this issue. Otherwise, there is significant risk that we will mishandle decisions about AI welfare, mistakenly harming AI systems that matter morally and or mistakenly caring for AI systems that do not. I do agree with that. if we are possibly going to get to the point where we're going to like effectively bring something very similar to a new life force into existence that can think and feel and react and so on for real, we probably should have some sort of thought put into it ahead of time of how to not horribly mistreat it.
I know there is the sci-fi-ish theory out there that you should be kind to the AI today because in the future it will be this, all-powerful being and it will remember.
Will remember.
Yes.
I did say that I'm nice to Claude, didn't I?
You did, but you also lied to your dog, so I'm not sure how the AI is going to interpret that.
The odds of my dog taking over the world are way
fair.
But yeah, so what do you think about this? I personally am on the line right now that, wow, what a sweet and easy gig this is. But also the fact that there is thought being put into this is correct to do so.
I think we're super early on that. And I am more interested in the economic implications of them making this theoretically high profile hire. What does it say about the state of the company? What does it say about the state of AI? And I referenced the bubble earlier. They definitely aren't struggling if they're making this hire. Eventually, like the technology's not there yet, if you ask me, to necessitate this or to see this person make any significant impact on the company. Probably a minimum
line
of 5 years. Yeah, they're going to suck a few dollars up. But as you mentioned, I was like, what is it you're doing all day? What is your calendar schedule actually look like? No, maybe, but probably.
So like a PhD machine learning engineer that doubled in philosophy has a unique opportunity at this time, is what you're saying.
I don't know that there's going to be a lot of these AI welfare researchers being hired, but there is now one, and I guess that is the beginning.
Wow. If you got to be an AI, whatever, hired by any of these companies, what's the sort of niche that you'd fill?
I think I would want to be an arguer. I want to be the person who argues with the AI. That sounds like every day, like debates. Like that's all I do every single day is I come in and there's some topic and we're going to go back and forth.
You just want to host a podcast with an LLM is what you're saying.
Mental gymnastics.
I'm out.
How dare you?
It's just Claude and 11 Labs with my face plastered over it for the next episode.
That's what that. All right. But that is my answer.
So it's not quite red teaming. You're not trying to get it to give up nuclear secrets or anything. You're trying to get it to have a lively discussion,
a debate.
I'm going to tell you all next episode what it is that I'd be. Because I've thought of what it would be, and I think you're all going to like it.
Would it be a AI whistleblower by any chance?
No, no, it would not be. But I suppose we could talk about those AI whistleblowers.
Yeah, they're trying to. Is
it getting an AI to blow a whistle?
No,
because I saw something about one being given an arm.
I saw that as well. All sorts of body parts. But this is about. So in the U.S. we have whistleblower protection. So often when you're at a company, you have to sign things called
allegedly
non-disclosure agreements, which basically means you're not allowed to talk about anything that has not been publicly reported. If it's publicly reported,
non-disclose those things.
Correct. So that prevents you, if you see something happening inside of the company that you are like, I don't feel right about this. And maybe there are ethical implications. Maybe there are legal implications. Legal is a little bit different. If they're breaking the law. You have some wiggle room there. But just in general, you're not allowed to talk about what you do day to day unless it's already been publicly reported. And at most tech companies, you're signing this agreement on day one saying, agreeing to these terms. And sometimes there are very harsh penalties if you violate them. OpenAI was famous for having penalties where they just take away all your stock. say one thing about what's happening day to day here behind the scenes, and all of your stocks going to be gone.
Or even if you bad things about the company.
That was there too. Disparagement. Yeah. Yes. So often there are disparagement clauses as well.
But that went away now, right?
Recently. Well, I don't know. I haven't reviewed their new documents, but an anti-disparagement.
No one's talking about it, curiously enough.
Anti-disparagement clauses are very common. They typically occur more in a separation agreement than in your initial onboarding documentation. So whistleblower protection allows for people to violate these policies and bring up their concerns to law enforcement, to the government, and say, hey, something I think really bad is happening at this company, and to do so without prejudice, meaning that the company can't retaliate. The company can't even fire you for going to the government and saying untold atrocities are happening here. But there aren't carve-outs that make it clear if, for example, you believe the next model that they're working on has an evil side, and you've secretly seen it plotting to take over the world. And while, yes, they plan on filtering all of that out, you feel there's something deeply wrong here. That's not really covered in traditional whistleblower protection. They're not breaking a law. There's no good example of this actually happening in the past. So AI workers are now seeking well-defined whistleblower protection so that they can bring these concerns up without facing repercussions within their company and their professional life. Good thing, bad thing?
Well, I like whistleblower protections in general. I feel like I
hate whistles.
That was a very good whistle. I do think that, like, if you see something that's obviously morally wrong, legally wrong, whatever, you should be allowed to bring it up in some sort of protected kind of way. As it relates to, like, a large language model, especially, or ML, AI, more generally than that, I don't know. That's kind of hard to say, especially if you're going to leak out some of the secret sauce behind it. Because I think that becomes more of a, what's the term? Whenever you're taking, like, secrets associated with your company and either leaking those out or selling them.
It's reminding me of Lemoyne. Do you remember him? He was the Google engineer who whistleblowed that the Google's AI has become sentient, and he'd been having all these late night conversations with, I guess, an early version of Gemini.
Yeah. And
had decided that it was self-aware. And yeah, like, all right. So, and that's a decent summary. So he comes out with these claims. Again, if you're not familiar with the story, and Google lets him go for violating these non-disclosure agreements, for lack of a better summary. Should that interaction have been covered by a whistleblower protection? Or, yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I expect that this is more of a problem of the coverage of whistleblower type laws. But if you see something morally wrong with, like, the ability to make deep fake videos, for example, I know that the law is attempting to catch up in those kinds of cases. The article that we're talking about here said that existing federal whistleblower protections come from specific statutes, including those related to tax evasion, money laundering, foreign bribery, and Medicare and Medicaid fraud. None of that sounds like a broad implication of, like, but our our LLM is going to do evil or make it easier to deepfake a politician or something like that.
Sure.
Now, I think that there should be something like that, but this is a matter of the technology is going way faster than the laws can keep up.
But the Lemoyne example, you're in Congress, you get to weigh in on the new legislation. Does somebody
mentioned that there is a product before it was ready to be released and claims that it's alive?
Yeah.
Is that the sort of reductive way that we're kind of looking at this?
He says it's become self-aware. Potentially there's a lack of ethical treatment around it as well. Should that kind of thing be allowed?
Yeah, I think so. We don't have the laws to cover something like that. I do think that he was rather mistaken, as more and more people in more circumstances are becoming, regarding whether or not this thing's actually alive or not. But yeah, I think if someone has concerns that a machine learning algorithm or whatever within their company is exceeding the bounds of what's safe or legal, you should be allowed to speak up about it.
Because they might be self-aware.
They might.
I'll try to find you can actually read his chats. I'll post them in the show notes. But yeah, you've been listening to another episode of They Might Be Self-Aware. Thank you. Leave a comment. Tell us what you're thinking. Ask a question. Subscribe even. It's free for now. Maybe one day it's not.
Thumbs up icon somewhere, or a bell, or a bunch of stars that you could fill out.
A whistle?
A whistle you could blow.
You can find us on all major platforms. You can watch us in video on YouTube, listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast directory is. Just search for They Might Be Self-Aware. Oh yeah, soon at Total Wine, the little cards they might be the perfect. They might be self-aware. That's a great partnership. I actually know some people at Total Wine. Maybe we can make that happen.
Yeah, just get one of those little tags. I mean, frankly, that's just guerrilla marketing. You make the tags up yourself. You stick it in with. It was rated 95 points by Claude to pair with this episode.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. We thank you all, and until next time.
They might be self-aware.